July 16, 1945. This is the darkness of a desert morning. And here in New Mexico, a group of men wait tensely, expectantly. Behind them, 3 unbroken years of work. Work done in unprecedented secrecy. Different cameras recorded from 6 miles away these views of the most concentrated release of explosive energy in the history of mankind. From the time of that first explosion until Hiroshima shuddered beneath the release of atomic energy, work on the bomb went steadily forward in closely guarded plants in New Mexico, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and Hanford, Washington. For over 100 years, the city of Hiroshima had garrisoned some of the Japanese Empire's finest troops. The city had never been subjected to actual bombing, but had been warned repeatedly. Now its army headquarters, barracks, ordnance, and quartermaster depots, factories, mills, and shipyards were to feel the weight of the atom's destructive power. 21 days after the New Mexico experiment, a B-29 was over Hiroshima carrying an atomic bomb. At 8:15 in the morning of August 6th, Japanese time, the first atomic bomb struck an enemy target. This is 0 Point on Hiroshima, the exact spot above the city at which the bomb burst over enemy territory, at the junction of the Matoyusu and Oto rivers. The atomic bomb was intentionally exploded well above its target in order to dissipate its radioactive material. The devastation you see here was caused by the explosion of the bomb above this 0 Point. Only the strongest buildings are left standing, and they are gutted. Looking north from 0 Point, this is what was left. Looking east, the camera records a scene of complete devastation in the immediate area. To the south, these are the ruins. Looking west from 0 Point, the same complete leveling is evident, the same inability of structures to withstand atomic power. Just 1/10 of a mile from 0 Point, the effect of the bomb blast can be seen on these stripped and broken trees and on this Russian-Japanese war memorial. Lines were literally blasted into the stone of the memorial. Here, looking west from the Sanwa building, the side of a concrete smokestack nearest the blast has been discolored. The Hiroshima Gas Company building on the right in this picture has been almost completely demolished by the force of the explosion from above, as though struck by a giant sledgehammer. The reinforced concrete Sanwa Bank building was wrecked even more completely. These twisted steel beams once supported the roof. The direction of the bomb blast can be seen clearly in these scenes of the concrete parapet wall extending above the bank building's roof. Two-tenths of a mile from 0 point was a Shinto shrine. Here, too, the blast stripped the trees and collapsed stonework. Originally, the base of this statue was polished granite, but now the stone is roughened by the force of the blast, which completely removed the polish. The lighter surfaces, which are being pointed out, indicate the angle of the bomb blast as though painted on the surface. The nearby lamppost shows flash burns on the side facing the blast. The Commercial Museum was also within 2/10 of a mile of 0 point, and the garden wall facing the blast was bent inward by the push of the explosion. The downward force of the blast caused the failure of the concrete beams which supported this roof, and the roof itself has settled so much that it now acts as a reservoir. Looking east, an area of complete devastation is all that can be seen. The railing was blown off this bridge, and the steel poles on the bridge show the effects of the atomic bomb blast, which hurled grit with such force as to etch the steel. The front of this school is a quarter of a mile from and faces 0 point. The sag in the concrete reinforced floor can be seen here in the entrance. The steel rods, which are now hanging, once supported a suspended ceiling. This reinforced concrete building was knocked sidewise, causing the lower story to collapse. This barren area, 3/10 of a mile from 0 point, once contained the main Japanese military headquarters. The barracks were utterly destroyed. Most of the military personnel, of approximately 20,000, were wiped out. The distorted steel framework is all that remains of a building which stood 4/10 of a mile from 0 point. Whereas this reinforced concrete building of the Chukogi Electric Company, 1/2 mile from 0 point, withstood the blast much better. 6/10 of a mile out, destruction was almost as complete as it was at 0 point. Wooden structures were completely collapsed by the blast. This was Hiroshima Castle. Its framework was demolished by the force of the blast, but fires of secondary origin did not occur. Because it happened to be at a 45-degree angle to the direction of the blast, the Hiroshima City Hall, with its heavily reinforced concrete construction, shows much less damage. Doors and windows were blown in by the force of the explosion. Shadows of the posts on Yorozuyo Bridge indicate the direction of the explosion. 6/10 of a mile from 0 point, the bridge floor is etched except where shielded by the railing. Outlined in the surface of the bridge is the shadow of a pedestrian, which tells its own meaningful story. One mile from 0 point, the blast damage shows lessening force, but the results of fires of secondary origin are still severe. On this side of a steel bridge over the Ota River, 1 mile away from and facing 0 point, the lead paint was almost completely removed by the sandblast effect, resulting from the explosion of the atomic bomb. The surface of the other side of the same bridge, however, was not visibly affected. Also a mile away from Zero Point is a Red Cross hospital, which, although damaged, never ceased functioning. This is the front of the building, which faces northeast. On the northwest side of the building, the steel windows and all floors were blown in. This southwest side of the building again shows windows blown in by the external air pressure caused by the explosion. Here, however, the windows in the southeast wall were blown out rather than in. A look inside the hospital shows chairs in the same position as at the time of the blast. The backs of the chairs, which faced Zero Point, were flash burned through the window. The mohair upholstery fabric was singed down to the base of the nap. The effect on this wall, which faced Zero Point, was almost identical with the damage done by the explosion to the opposite wall. In addition, interior partitions were knocked down. Looking toward Zero Point from the roof of the Red Cross Hospital a mile away, the tremendous destruction created by the first atomic bomb can be seen. Army vehicles of our occupying forces are moving through the city streets. Here, looking in the opposite direction toward the south, away from Zero Point, only a few masonry foundation walls remain, and what is left of one reinforced concrete building. Looking west, still a mile from Zero Point, the only sign of a small industrial plant is a lone concrete smokestack. Temporary housing facilities built with scrap material have been thrown up in the area. No matter what kind of construction the Japanese used, whether it consisted of wooden frame and mud plaster walls as here, or wooden lath and plaster veneer construction, they made no attempt to zone their various types of buildings. Barracks, homes, industrial centers of steel and reinforced concrete, factory buildings of brick construction, all were crowded together with no apparent regard for the safety of the civilian population. Within an area of a mile to a mile and a half, there was almost complete destruction except for some reinforced concrete buildings. From 1.5 to 2 miles, there was severe damage by fire and moderate damage by blast. From 2 to 6 miles, there was minor damage by blast and fire, varying from damaged roofs to broken windows. These wooden buildings, 1.5 miles from the center of the blast, were all subject to fires of secondary origin. The Higaski Railroad Station in East Hiroshima, 1.5 miles from Zero Point, although still in use, was extensively damaged. The marquee crumbled from the force of the blast and has been removed. When the marquee fell, it pulled the brick veneer off part of the building. Inside of the station, steel beams supporting the roof were twisted out of shape, and the concrete walls, though still standing, show the effects of the tremendous concussion. This high school building, the same distance from Zero Point as the railroad station, had its north wall smashed in by the blast. The second story of the north wall was especially badly damaged. Looking through a bombed-out section of the wall to Zero Point, notice that not all the buildings in this area were as severely damaged as the schoolhouse. A portion of the wall of the school was blown in across the desks, and partitions were shifted. The high school wall farthest from the Zero Point now bulges in the direction of the blast, and all glass was blown out of the window frame. Between Zero Point and the main building of the novitiate of Jesuits 4 miles away was a hill which served to lessen the intensity of the blast. Yet, despite this protection, All the windows were shattered and part of the wall blown in. The chapel, which is the left wing of the building, is built of timber with plaster walls. The glass in the doors of the main entrance foyer were shattered, and the paneled ceiling was blown loose by the force of the explosion occurring 4 miles away. A group of Jesuits who were teaching in Hiroshima witnessed and survived the explosion. One of them has provided an eyewitness account.
Father, would you introduce yourself, please?
I am Father John Zemus, Professor of Philosophy at the Catholic University of Tokyo, which is under management of the Jesuit fathers.
What were you doing in Hiroshima at the time of the explosion?
Well, my philosophical class was evacuated from Tokyo to Hiroshima about 5 months ago, and I was staying with my class at a house of studies at the outskirts of the city of Hiroshima.
Could you describe exactly what happened in the morning of August the 6th?
I was in my room, which faces the valley, and suddenly I saw a light, like magnesium light, flashlight, which filled the whole valley. And looking out of my window to find out the reason for this peculiar phenomena, I saw nothing besides this light, and turning from the window to the door of my room, I heard a crash. It may have been 10 seconds after seeing the light, the flashlight. And immediately I was covered with splinters of the window frames and glass sticking into the walls and actually my flesh itself. I tried to get out of my room, but found that our house had been severely damaged by the blast of this explosion. I had the impression at that time that the bomb had immediately crashed on a house. So severe, so strong was the effect of the percussion. But looking outside the house, I saw no trace of the bomb itself, but about a kilometer away from our houses, I saw several peasant houses which were on fire. After a while, we saw a procession of people coming from the outskirts of the city up the valley. Many of them, most of them, were wounded, especially the parts of the body which were not covered by clothes, like hands, feet, back. They came up to our house, and we did what we could, but there were no possibility to give much of aid. As a matter of fact, we used all our grease we had at that wartime in the house, and it was exhausted in a moment.
How many people do you think were killed?
All of us who lived through this experience at the spot estimate the numbers of deaths at least at 100,000. This estimate is not based on official figures, but just on a knowledge of special groups under the population.
Was there anybody to take charge of the city after the disaster?
There was nobody to take charge after the disaster, because all important people were practically killed. The major, the commander of the city, many high-ranking officers, a Korean prince, which was stationed at the time in Hiroshima, and also the regiments of the city were wiped out.
What is your opinion as to the story that the ruins of the city emitted deadly rays?
Well, I think that it's just a rumor, because I myself and others of us have worked in the city itself immediately after the explosion for several hours, and we felt no ill effect at all.
Tell me a little about the Japanese reaction towards the Americans and towards the atomic bomb.
Neither myself nor anybody of our fathers heard a single outburst of hate against the Americans in those terrible days. And during the whole war, we didn't experience much about hatred against the Allies. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of the war, after the big Japanese victories, the Japanese were inclined to look down on the enemy. But then, after the offensive went off according to schedule, they began to admire the skill of the Americans. And especially since the majestic B-29 appeared over Tokyo, practically every Japanese admired the technical skill of the Americans.
Father, what is your and your colleagues' opinion as to the use of the atomic bomb?
We have discussed among ourselves the ethics of the use of the bomb. Some consider it in the same category as poison gas and were against its use on the civilian population. Others were of the view that in total war, as carried on in Japan, there was no difference between civilians and soldiers, and that the bomb itself was an effective force tending to end the bloodshed, warning Japan to surrender and thus to avoid total destruction. It seems logical to me that he who supports total war in principle cannot complain of a war against civilians. The crux of the matter is whether total war in its present form is justifiable even when it serves a just purpose. Does it not have material and spiritual evil as its consequences which far exceed whatever the good that might result? When will our moralists give us a clear answer to this question?
The business of living goes on in the devastated areas of Hiroshima. In the northeastern section of the city, temporary homes are constructed of whatever materials can be salvaged from the ruins. Near the Higashi Railroad Station in eastern Hiroshima, scrap lumber, tin, and roof tile are all used in an attempt to build anew, in no matter how flimsy a fashion. Immediately following the bombing of Hiroshima, the President of the United States delivered an ultimatum to the Japanese government. Surrender or face complete destruction. The ultimatum was ignored. At 10:58 the morning of August 9th, Japanese time, the second atomic bomb was exploded over the industrial seaport city of Nagasaki. Almost the entire population of 230,000 people was engaged in the manufacture of arms, munitions, and other war products. Two great Mitsubishi factories were located in the heart of the city. To the north, one of the world's largest torpedo plants, and further south, the huge steel and arms works. The bomb, which was dropped on Nagasaki, was aimed at a point midway between the two plants in order to cause the greatest possible industrial damage. Unlike Hiroshima, the force of the explosion at Nagasaki was largely confined to the industrial valley, which was surrounded by a series of hills that shielded many other areas of the city. A great towering mushroom effect could be seen going higher and higher and reaching into the stratosphere. Because the bomb was exploded high above the ground, the greatest part of its harmful radioactive material was dissipated in the stratosphere. As a result, the area under the explosion was relatively free from radioactivity. Persons entering Nagasaki shortly after the explosion to do rescue work sustained no ill effect or injury. In an area of a little more than 3 square miles, there was very severe damage by blast and fire. Most buildings were reduced to rubble. Still recognizable from the air are the skeleton remainders of the Mitsubishi plants, the large steel and arms works, and the ordnance factory devoted to the manufacture of torpedoes. The Mitsubishi Steel and Arms Works extended almost a mile in length. Its buildings were modern and typical of American industrial construction, having steel frames and roof and siding of corrugated metal or asbestos. Buildings of reinforced concrete still stand amid the wreckage of steel frames. Some smokestacks survived. They offered comparatively little resistance to the blast. But as in Hiroshima, the directional force bent steel and stripped corrugated metal from the framework of the building. Where corrugated metal remained, it was pushed in like tissue paper. These buildings show a varying degree of destruction depending upon proximity to 0 point and building strength. This foundry, 3/10 of a mile away from 0 point, shows considerable damage in spite of fairly good construction. Other buildings were stronger, some being constructed to support heavy overhead cranes. Damage to equipment inside was nevertheless serious. This machinery had been used in the manufacture of naval rifles, anti-aircraft guns, and heavy artillery. In the valley, homes were scattered through factory areas. On machinery in many of these homes, piecework was carried on to help the Japanese war effort. Blast and secondary fire destroyed the lightly constructed buildings, in many cases leaving damaged equipment. Photographed from 0 point, this area of 3 1/10 square miles shows almost utter devastation by blast and fire. Note how hills in the south interrupted the blast. In the second area of 5 1/2 square miles, there was moderate damage from blast and severe damage from fires. The total area of damage covered almost 42 1/2 square miles, ranging from complete destruction to damaged roofs and broken windows. The greatest distance at which damage was measured was 12 miles, where, through a peculiar focusing of concussion, workers' barracks were knocked down. One-half mile from 0 point, a cracked smokestack. A prison of concrete and masonry 2/10 of a mile from 0 point was almost totally destroyed. The walls left standing were parallel to the direction of the blast. This area was completely wiped out from 0 point up to the church at the foot of the hills about a mile away. In the bed of the creek rests the dome, which was blown from its place at the top of the church. The gas works was blown into a mass of twisted steel. 2 concrete walls, the remains of 2 factory buildings. Bridges showed greater destruction in Nagasaki than in Hiroshima. But even close to 0 point, the downward force of the blast failed to damage roads and railroads due to the height at which the bomb was detonated. The main north-south street of Nagasaki was in use shortly after the disaster occurred. A typical residence on the outskirts of Nagasaki, a mile and a half from 0 point. 6 weeks after the explosion of the atomic bomb over Nagasaki, the survivors are busy working at the restoration of their homes. This is the record. Endless man-hours of work. 2 B-29s, 2 atomic bombs 3 days apart, 2 cities. The tabulation of that record speaks for itself.
General George S. Patton's 7th Army is blasting its way across the island of Sicily. Whoever controls the airfields of Sicily will control the Mediterranean. But Patton isn't just battling against German and Italian forces. He's also competing with British rival Bernard Montgomery. Patton wants the glory of victory in Sicily to belong to his forces, not the British. Now, Patton's 7th Army slams into some of Hitler's best warriors. But General Patton is about to make the biggest mistake of his career. General George S. Patton. His bold attacks are legendary. See the war as he saw it, and ride along with his hard-fighting troops as they battle their way through World War II. On this 360-degree battlefield, Patton's enemies could be anywhere and everywhere. There's nowhere to run when the war is all around. Patton 360, Rogue General. Sicily, July 31st, 1943. For 21 days, Patton's 7th Army has been fighting the Germans and Italians for control of the island in the first U.S. invasion of Europe. Patton heads the American forces, driving from the west. British troops are advancing from the southeast. The target, capture the port city of Messina before the Axis forces can evacuate to the Italian mainland. As the men of the 1st Infantry Division battle their way up the center of the island, they grind to a sudden halt before the mountaintop city called Troina and the German defenses known as the Etna Line.
It was hard country to fight in because all the hills and mountains, you know. So you'd have to take one hill after another.
Troina is the highest occupied point in Sicily. It sits astride one of the few decent roads going from west to east. The Americans have 2 highways, 117 on the coast, 120 which runs parallel to the coast, 10 or so miles inland. Those are really the only 2 roads that you can use to get to Messina.
In command of the 1st Infantry Division is Major General Terry Allen, a personal friend of Patton's. Allen is a battle-wise, hard-drinking veteran of the First World War, who led the Big Red One to victory in North Africa.
Allen was a real professional. He was also a very flamboyant, character. He and Patton were very close and had a great relationship. That relationship would wear over time.
Allen and Assistant Commander Teddy Roosevelt Jr., son of the famous Rough Riding president, believed that the Germans will probably fall back and not defend the town in a senseless waste of human life. Allen is dead wrong. Medium tanks and M7 self-propelled artillery can only offer supporting fire from a distance. Allen will have to hit Troina the old-fashioned way, with infantry. Allen selects the men of the 39th Regimental Combat Team, a unit on loan from the 9th Division, to lead the frontal attack.
Troina is a hornet's nest. The Germans, from their position on the high ground, can use their 75mm guns and all their machine guns to just cut the Americans to pieces.
Among the enemy guns pointed at Patton's troops is the versatile PaK-40. Designed in 1939, the PaK-40 75mm is a workhorse of German artillery, with a rate of fire of 14 rounds per minute and an effective range of 1,969 yards. the PaC-40 can launch a 15-pound shell that's capable of penetrating armor at 1,640 feet.
If you put a PaC-40 in the right position, it could dominate a valley, it could dominate a road. So if you put that one gun with a good crew, a well-trained crew with enough ammunition in a place, you could stop movement up the narrow roads in Sicily for a very long time.
But even more deadly than the well-aimed 75s are the fearsome German 88mm guns. A veteran of North Africa and the invasion of Sicily, Carl Peterson knows firsthand just how deadly the 88 is.
That was what we were scared of more than anything, because they could fire 3 rounds in a row. Bang, bang, bang. That was a mean weapon.
The American assault is forced to cut and run. Now, Allen brings up his own big guns, 105mm and 155mm howitzers. 2 miles away, U.S. gunfire tears the ridges and buildings of Troina to pieces. U.S. armor, in the form of the 62nd Field Artillery Battalion, join the fight. Serving in the 62nd is Florida native and North Africa veteran, Tieferd Roebuck.
We probably fired as many shells trying to take Troina as we did at any one time in North Africa. You couldn't see the town sometimes for the smoke from the bombs and artillery shells.
As Allen watches the bombardment, Carl Peterson and his comrades from the 26th Infantry Regiment prepare for an all-out assault aimed at breaking the Etna line, where Axis forces have been digging in for weeks. Flashback. July 10th, 1943. General George S. Patton leads 90,000 American troops into battle on the island of Sicily. After fighting his way off the beachhead, Patton leads an armored charge across Sicily, crushing the Italian soldiers under the command of General Alfredo Guzzoni. In less than 2 weeks, he marches triumphantly into the city of Palermo. Patton's army has seized its first enemy capital.
They've cut the island in half. The Germans have been isolated. So what Patton's going to do is he's going to shoot for Messina.
Field Marshal Sir Harold Alexander, commander of all Allied ground troops, orders Patton and his rival, British General Bernard Montgomery, to capture the vital city of Messina on the far northeastern point of the island. Monty's 8th Army will fight its way north along the eastern coast, while Patton makes a 2-pronged assault from the west.
This is the pot of gold waiting for him at the end of this battle. He feels if he can get Messina, he can prove the fighting quality of his army to the equal, if not better, than the British.
Patton tells one division commander, this is a horse race in which the prestige of the U.S. Army is at stake. We must take Messina before the British. Patton's forces are split into 2 corps. The first, under General Lucian Truscott, will move down Highway 113 along the northern coast. The Second Corps, under General Omar Bradley, will head up Highway 120 through the center of the island. Target, Messina. Strategy: seize the enemy port and sea lanes, capture the Nazis before they escape to Italy, and beat the British to the finish line. Tactics: Patton's army will move in as 2 pincers, taking the Germans head-on. But unlike Patton's charge on Palermo, Messina will be no cakewalk.
The American troops traveling along the coast road have a mountain at their right and the Mediterranean at their left. The Germans realize this. They're going to blow bridges, they're going to destroy roads. They realize the American troops are being funneled into a very narrow battlefield, and they're going to take advantage of it as best they can.
The enemy forces are under the overall command of Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, who's already become an expert on how to bleed the American army. He's a deadly opponent for George S. Patton. From his headquarters in Italy, smiling Albert Kesselring plans a defensive strategy to buy time for a massive withdrawal, ordering Axis forces to dig defensive lines on the high ground overlooking the vital highways. Kesselring intends to make Patton pay for every inch of ground taken in blood. The first defensive position is called the Etna Line. Running from the eastern shore of Sicily and around the base of the volcanic slopes of Mount Etna, the line stretches all the way to the Tyrrhenian Sea. But Patton is dead certain that his conquerors could break the Etna Line and beat the British. He tells his men, "You have, during 21 days of ceaseless battle and unremitting toil, killed and captured more than 87,000 soldiers. You are magnificent soldiers. You are closing for the kill. The end is certain and is very near. Messina is our next stop." Patton's drive on Messina begins in one of the Etna Line's toughest spots, the city of Troina. August 2nd, 1943, American artillery pummels the enemy high ground. Only miles away, U.S. shells rain in on the German positions.
Patton told them they had to get their artillery to fire as fast and effectively as possible. As many guns as you can muster on one target at one time. The effect is devastating.
But the Germans are so well entrenched that no amount of American firepower is enough to break them.
The way they were dug in, it just seemed like the more we would throw our artillery at them and the more that the bombers would bomb, it just seemed like we couldn't get rid of them.
Allen has vastly underestimated what's going to be required to take Troina. And he finally realized he's got to put the whole 1st Division, 20,000 soldiers plus, into this attack, trying to outflank the Germans, trying to get around Troina.
For the men of the 26th Infantry Regiment, the mission is to seize the high ground of Monte Vasilio, 2 miles north of Troina, to help outflank the city.
It was early in the evening. As we were going up to the hill, the Germans were right in that area. In fact, they were so close, sometimes, you know, it'd be hand-to-hand going on.
As Carl Peterson and his comrades get pinned down on Monte Vasilio, Patton and his generals suddenly realize that the road to Messina will be uphill slaughter all the way. Troina, Sicily, August 1943. For 5 days, American soldiers from Patton's 7th Army have been hammering the town with artillery, mortars, and rifles. Patton's GIs are on a race against their British allies in the 8th Army, trying to prevent a German evacuation from Messina to Italy.
What 7th Army is doing now is they're doing a sort of a two-front offensive. One part of it is traveling along the North Coast Road. The other half of his army has got the tough fight. They're stuck at the Etna Line.
In his journal, Patton notes, "The mountains are the worst I've ever seen. It is a miracle that our men get through them, but we must keep up the steady pressure. We must beat the 8th Army to Messina."
There's a serious question about whether he was so obsessed with capturing Messina that he would risk anything to capture it. I wouldn't say Patton was reckless as much as he was obsessed.
From his command post, General Terry Allen and Omar Bradley watch as American gunfire tears the city to pieces. But so far, Allen has been unable to break the German defensive along the Etna Line.
Troina, like most Italian towns, is a lot of stone and masonry. It's very good for fighting defensively. It's an ugly thing. It goes on and on and on.
General Omar Bradley simply can't stand the hard-drinking Allen, a dislike going back to Tunisia. And as the battle for Troina drags on, Allen comes under intense pressure from both Bradley and Patton to get the job done. Right now, PFC Carl Peterson and the men of the 26th Regiment are in the fight of their lives on the critical high ground of Monte Vasilio.
We didn't get very many supplies. They'd sneak one guy or two guys out to go back and get a pack full of ammunition and stuff, bring it up. That's the way we kept us going the best we could.
The GIs of the 26th, they're hell-bent on keeping the high ground, but they're running low on ammo, food, supplies, and the German machine gunners aren't making it any easier for them. For an infantryman, that's hell on earth.
By the morning of August 4th, Patton's men are so low on water and ammunition that it's only a matter of time before they're driven off the hill or wiped out. On the ridges above, German machine gunners have taken up new positions overlooking the American foxholes.
We were just trying to hang together. We were down on this ledge, and there was a German machine gun was over on the ridge, and they were just wiping our guys out really bad.
Finally, Peterson's comrade, PFC James Reese of Chester, Pennsylvania, decides that something must be done. He immediately leads Peterson and his squad into a position overlooking the German machine gun nest and opens fire with an M2 60mm mortar. The M2 mortar is a muzzle loading weapon that can accurately lob a 60mm explosive at an enemy target at 1,000 yards. Its overall weight is 42 pounds, and in extreme conditions can fire a maximum of 35 rounds per minute.
It was a very effective weapon for the infantry to use in providing indirect fire and providing infantry support for an attack in that kind of environment.
But Reese's mortar rounds are running low, and now Patton's GIs are facing a counterattack.
We didn't have much ammunition left, and we only had the one mortar down there. So Reese, he told everybody, including me, to get their butt out of there, you know.
Peterson refuses to leave Reese's side, and together they continue to engage the enemy until the German fire becomes unbearable.
Reese says, "Okay, Pete," he says, "get your butt out of here." And I only had a .45 pistol, and I couldn't shoot the guys down in the brush with that, so I figured, well, I better get out too.
On his own, Reese single-handedly fires the last of his ammunition. Reese is last seen pumping an 8-round clip of hot .30 caliber lead from his M1 at the enemy before a direct hit kills him instantly. Patton's troops managed to hold their position on Monte Vasilio, and thanks to PFC James Reese, the machine guns that had been killing GIs only minutes before have been wiped out.
So that's what saved us, was him knocking off these extra people that were coming up.
For the heroic action that takes his life at Monte Vasilio, PFC James Reese will be posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. After a week of horrific combat, Patton's forces gained the upper hand at Troina.
Finally, with all the bombing and the artillery, it finally softened them up and the Germans started moving back.
Terry Allen's 1st Infantry Division has opened the way for Patton's drive on Messina, but it has come at a terrible price.
Troina is utterly smashed. It's been under air and artillery attack for almost a week now. There are lots of dead, German dead, Italian dead, American dead. It's one of the hardest fought battles of World War II.
Andrew Jacobson, a North Africa veteran, gets a first-hand look at the aftermath.
The people started coming back into the town. They were devastated by it, of course, but still, they weren't really ticked off at us. Well, even though we had destroyed the town, actually, but I believe that they figured the Germans caused it, you know.
In the wake of the epic debacle at Troina, Terry Allen and Teddy Roosevelt Jr. are relieved of command.
It was just like losing a member of the family, just like they'd been killed.
The myth that kind of comes out of this is that Patton fired them. That's not true. It was Omar Bradley, but for some reason it is always held that Patton is the responsible individual for the firing of Terry Allen. And the 1st Infantry Division will continuously hold Patton responsible for anything bad happening to the 1st Infantry Division.
20 miles north, Patton's advance along Highway 113 is slugging it out.
The Germans have the high ground. They can put observed artillery fire down. The Germans are becoming better and better at demolitions. So if you have a culvert, it's likely to have been packed with explosives.
As the casualties mount, no one feels the pressure for beating the British to Messina more than General Lucian Truscott, an ex-cavalryman who fought beside Patton in the invasion of North Africa. Truscott comes up with a bold plan to break the stalemate on the coast and outfight the Nazis. And it just might turn the tide of battle and help Patton win the race to Messina. Sicily, August 7th, 1943. For more than a week, General George Patton's army and their British allies have been on a desperate race to the city of Messina and the bragging rights to victory.
The image, of course, that Patton wants to portray is of an armored thrust. It's not going to be that way. It's going to be the 3rd Infantry Division charging along the coast.
General Lucian Truscott has been hitting the enemy hard. But a full frontal assault against the coastal town of San Fratello simply isn't enough to break the Nazis under the expert command of Albert Kesselring.
Truscott's going to have to figure out some other way of getting around them, or the Germans are just going to hold their ground till hell freezes over.
Truscott comes up with a new plan, a joint Army-Navy operation. He'll send his troops in on an amphibious assault behind the enemy position. If he can't break their lines, he'll just go around them. 9 p.m. Under cover of darkness, Allied vessels and landing craft move into position just offshore. Onboard destroyer USS Edison is Ensign Franklin Daly of Georgia.
We would have a small group of landing craft, and we would shepherd them to a point behind the enemy defenses, put them ashore, and then give them shore fire control support. We would be their artillery.
The assault takes the German defenders completely by surprise. 1,000 yards away, the German soldiers still manning their positions don't know what's hit them. And Patton's troops take over 1,000 prisoners. However, Axis commanders have already used the same cover of night to withdraw most of their troops to the city of Brolo and the high ground at Monte Cipolla. Nevertheless, the right flank of the Etna line has collapsed.
They've tested a new strategy, and it works to some degree. Although they have mixed results, they get ashore effectively. Patton likes this, and he wants to do it again, but this time at Brolo.
Once again, Patton's GIs and armored vehicles will make an amphibious end run behind enemy lines, with the firepower of Allied warships backing them up.
Truscott says, we're not ready for it. We need some more time to put it together. Patton doesn't care. He wants to go on the offensive. He needs to keep his army moving to keep it alive. Truscott, at one point, believes that Patton is doing this for the cameras and believes that Patton is doing this for his own prestige.
By now, most of Patton's generals and the GIs under his command are growing weary of old blood and guts. They believe that Patton's obsessive strategy has more to do with beating the British than it does with beating the Nazis. The men under Patton's command have already seen enough carnage on Sicily to fill a lifetime. They've been fighting and suffering for weeks in some of the worst terrain they've ever encountered. And tropical diseases like malaria are spreading through the ranks like wildfire. The simmering heat in Sicily is merciless. Most of Patton's men wear wool uniforms and carry a single aluminum canteen. Every day brings another batch of casualties taken out by exhaustion and fatigue.
U.S. Army soldiers today are in a far better position for fighting in extreme high temperatures than they were in 1943 during the Battle for Sicily. You'll see frequently the Camelback, which is a device where you have a bladder that's mounted on your back with a siphon tube that comes up, and you can periodically just take it and take a mouthful of water out of the bladder that's being carried on your back. And that helps you hydrate and stay hydrated, especially in hot weather.
On an almost daily basis, Patton visits the field hospitals behind the lines. The tough-as-nails commander still has a soft spot for his wounded warriors. After one visit to the hospital, Patton wrote in his journal, one man had the top of his head blown off, and they were just waiting for him to die. He was a horrid, bloody mess and was not good to look at, or I might develop personal feelings about sending men into battle. That would be fatal for a general.
He has got to be that hardened soldier, the warrior that he's always wanted to be in order to get his men to do what he wants. Now, this philosophy and Patton's personal feelings can come in conflict from time to time.
For some, the nightmare in Sicily is simply too much.
Back then, a man that broke down was more or less looked upon as a coward. We had over the years several men that committed suicide. They just simply can't take but so much.
But for Patton, a veteran of campaigns in Mexico, World War I, and North Africa, anyone claiming to have battle fatigue is nothing more than a coward. The situation comes to a head when Patton makes one of his regular stops at a field hospital behind the lines on August 3rd.
And he went there to see his boys and to pay homage to those who'd been wounded, really. There is a soldier who doesn't quite fit with the others who are there wounded. In the first episode, his name was Charles Kuhl. He was a private first class from the 1st Infantry Division. He had a fever of 102 plus. He had malaria. He had chronic diarrhea. He had various other genuine ailments.
It's enough to pull him off the front lines. But when Kuhl tells Patton that his nerves are shot, the general suddenly explodes and slaps Kuhl in the face.
Patton completely lost his composure, accused him of cowardice, roaring, "I won't have a yellow coward defaming this place of valor with these fine wounded men."
And then he looks at Kuhl and yelled, "You hear me, you son of a bitch? You're going back to the front."
The key ingredient to anything Patton did was his leadership. And the key ingredient of his leadership was his ability to inspire soldiers to do things that many of them didn't think they could do. Sometimes he used the right method. Sometimes he chose the wrong method.
Only days later, Patton slaps an artilleryman in another hospital who claims to have battle fatigue. In a fit of rage, Patton reaches for his trademark Colt Peacemaker. A doctor restrains Patton before anyone gets hurt.
really abusing these soldiers in this way was one of the most disappointing things about his leadership in World War II.
News of Patton's violent attacks is kept under wraps. But the average soldier in Patton's army is reaching his limit.
By this point, the enlisted man's been driven hard. And now he's starting to think, hey, all this guy wants is the glory. He doesn't care about me. I mean, how the hell do you think he got the nickname Old Blood and Guts?
And now, General Patton is about to send these same battle-weary soldiers into yet another bloody hornet's nest at Brolo. Sicily, August 1943. The GIs of Patton's 7th Army are slugging it out with Nazi Field Marshal Albert Kesselring's forces on a race to the city of Messina. But the clock is ticking. The Allies must get to Messina before the Germans can escape to Italy. And Patton is hell-bent on beating his rival, British General Montgomery, to the finish line.
Lucian Truscott, commander of 3rd Infantry Division, performs a small amphibious landing along the northern coast of Sicily. It proves successful. It keeps the Germans guessing, it keeps them retreating. Patton sees this and wants to do another one at a town called Brolo.
It's a classic pincer move. While ground forces under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Lyle Bernard sneak ashore in the pre-dawn hours, General Lucian Truscott's 3rd Division and its tank columns will hit the Germans with a full frontal attack. 1 a.m., August 11th, 1943. Bernard's forces appear off the coast of Brolo and Monte Cipolla. They're escorted by 5 destroyers and light cruiser USS Philadelphia. While the assault forces go ashore with Bernard, the big guns of the fleet will cover their landings and will rake the German lines with heavy fire and clear the skies of Axis planes.
The landing at Brolo takes place at night. The intent is to get on top of a mountain that overlooks the road that comes along the coastline there. Things start to go wrong very quickly for this battalion.
As tanks get bogged down by the terrain, the sneak attack slows down. As each minute ticks by, Patton's soldiers are losing the element of surprise.
And you're just sitting there in the dark hours, watching the clock tick by, waiting. I mean, the tension's got to be unbelievable for these guys. And then the sun rises, and all hell breaks loose.
By 10:30 a.m., Bernard's sneak attack has failed. 1,000 yards away, cruiser Philadelphia and other American ships open fire, raking the enemy positions. Gunners' mates load and fire with everything they've got. But just as suddenly as she appears on the battlefield, the Philadelphia pulls out, fearing an enemy airstrike that could come out of anywhere.
We usually had a lot of forewarning for most of those attacks. But I can understand a ship like the Philadelphia being called away from one mission quickly if she had to defend herself against an aircraft attack.
The GIs are in the worst situation imaginable. They've moved into positions where they're covered by German fire, they're in the open, they can't advance. It's August in Sicily, they're scorching hot, and they have no water.
Under searing sunlight, Patton's troops do all they can to hold off the Germans at Brolo with small arms and machine guns.
It's like the child's game, rock, scissors, paper. If you have the rock of infantry landing, the paper that can cover that is the enemy fires and combined arms coming there. But what then you need is the scissors to cut that paper, which is naval gunfire.
Finally, at 5:45 p.m., USS Philadelphia comes back. In a matter of minutes, the cruiser hammers out more than 1,000 shells. But in the skies overhead, enemy bombers from Italy make a run on the Allied warships. While Philadelphia's main battery guns thunder away in support of the infantry, her 20 and 40 millimeter flak guns tear the skies. Philadelphia manages to fight off the air assault, but once again, the floating fortress pulls back.
Bernard's men are on their last legs. They're almost out of ammunition. The air attack has also destroyed the last of their artillery pieces. The Germans are attacking with even greater ferocity.
As night falls, small groups of American soldiers cluster together near the beaches, ready to make a last stand when the sun rises over the bloody Sicilian battlefield. Dawn, August 12, 1943. Battle-weary riflemen peer over the tops of foxholes, ready to greet another day of carnage at Brolo. But there is only silence. The enemy has simply disappeared.
Really, it's the appearance coming up the road of the main force of 3rd Infantry Division that causes the Germans to fall back. Bernard's force is saved, but there are substantial casualties, a couple hundred men.
But despite the costs, Patton's strategy of outflanking the enemy has worked. For the Nazis, Sicily is a lost cause. From his headquarters in Rome, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring plans the final evacuation of his entire army to mainland Italy. Thousands of enemy troops begin a fighting retreat, falling back and doing all they can to buy time to make their escape. August 14th, 1943. Patton's 7th Army is now almost within sight of their target, the port city of Messina. As Peter Havali and the tankers of the 753rd Battalion move within miles of Messina, they get a close-up look at German firepower.
So we're moving in column. We reached the end of the road. It was an empty lot, maybe 50 feet wide, 100 feet deep. And once the first tank passed this empty lot, the Germans began to shell us.
Caught in the open, the American tank column is in danger of being cut to pieces on the deadly road to Messina. August 14th, 1943. Patton's 7th Army is only miles from the finish line, the port city of Messina, and victory in Sicily. His rival, British General Bernard Montgomery, is also moving in. The two Allied armies are nearly neck and neck. But right now, Peter Havali and his comrades in the 753rd Tank Battalion are in danger of being destroyed by artillery as they move up a road in support of American infantry. Enemy guns still cover the approaches to Messina, buying time for the German retreat. Havali's commander immediately orders the tankers to pull back and take cover behind a row of buildings and wait it out.
So we got in there, shooting the bull, going to find out what the hell we're going to do next. Then pretty soon a Jeep pulls up, and the guy comes out. Guess who? General Patton. So he looked at Lieutenant. He said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Well," he said, "we're supposed to go and attack that area there." Well, he said, "Get your freaking ass out of here and go ahead and do it."
The tanks immediately take off, guns blazing. While Havali drives the tank, he directs the fire of his gunner. The Stuarts spray lead at anything that moves.
I said, "Yeah, 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock." And he pointed the gun right where he fired. He hit that sucker right in the middle of boom, and just blew it up. And then we kept on going. A lot of vehicles burning flesh. It smells like crazy. A lot of dead Germans. From then on, the road was open, clear to Messina, with no problems.
Midnight, August 17th, 1943. Enemy ships run back and forth between Sicily and Italy, evacuating the cream of Albert Kesselring's army, just ahead of the arrival of American and British troops. smiling Albert Kesselring's strategy of delay and retreat has paid off. Hours later, battle-weary GIs finally reached the outskirts of Messina, with orders to keep any British units from entering until Old Blood and Guts himself can march triumphantly into the city. Despite a fever of 103 degrees, Patton lays claim to Messina for the U.S. Army at 10 a.m. But victory is bittersweet.
Yeah, it's not an unvarnished triumph. The island is taken. For Patton, it's glorious, and yet he's got himself in the worst problem of his life.
Days earlier, Patton personally slapped 2 soldiers suffering from battle fatigue. At first, the story was kept under wraps. But when the news of the incidents reaches the press, the public outcry is enormous.
Eisenhower wrote a scorching letter to Patton saying, "Nothing has given me more pain in my military career than this. I have to question your fitness for high command."
Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, orders Patton to apologize to the 2 soldiers he slapped. But Patton takes it a step further, apologizing to every division under his command.
That wasn't good enough for me. That didn't satisfy me. I didn't like him before he slapped him, but that just did it with me. He had no right to put his hands on those boys.
He's won the biggest victory the U.S. Army has seen so far in the European theater. His 7th Army has not lost a battle, yet because of the slapping of 2 soldiers, Patton is now going to go into exile. He's going to pay for what he did.
Though the American and British armies have won a valuable base of operations in Europe, victory in Sicily has come at a terrible price. In 38 days of battle, Patton's 7th Army has suffered the loss of 2,237 killed in action and another 6,500 wounded. Overall, the Allies have lost 24,000 men to combat, wounds, and disease.
Sicily's been characterized as a bitter victory because while it achieved the objective of defeating the German forces on the island of Sicily, the German forces were in large measure able to escape intact. And these are the same forces, these very well-trained, well-equipped divisions that U.S. forces would have to face in Italy.
While Patton waits in exile, most of his combat soldiers head into battle under other generals. Peter Havale and Teford Roebuck will go on to Italy, where they'll once again face smiling Albert Kesselring. Carl Peterson, Andrew Jacobson, and the men of the 1st Infantry Division go to England, where, along with thousands of other American soldiers, they prepare for the Normandy invasion. For now, all that Patton can do is hope for vindication and pray for another chance to close with the enemy. That November, Patton writes in his journal, "My command has so far disposed of 177,000 Germans, Italians, and French, killed, wounded, and prisoner. It would be a national calamity to lose an army commander with such a record."
He's afraid that if he loses this command, he'll never be in the war again. He'll never get another shot at the enemy.
Soon, on Patton 360, the Allies will launch the massive campaign to liberate Europe and attempt to crush Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. And while the war rages on, General Patton will face the greatest challenge of his life, the battle to save his career and his destiny.